faces out there, but some of you may be saying, what is the Institute for Humane Studies? I'm going to kick that question over to our executive director. Join me in welcoming IHS's executive director, Courtney Durr.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you to PubKey for hosting us tonight. Thank you to Gideon Powell for investing in IHS and inviting us into this wonderful and crazy community that is Bitcoin. And thank you to you all for being here tonight. So if you give me just a minute, I'd love to talk a little bit about IHS and the why behind this gathering. A few centuries ago, people did exactly what we're doing now. They gathered together in taverns and in cafes to talk about ideas. And they brought their half-formed ideas to have them tested and refined and broken apart and made better. And these tinkerers and cranks were working on some of the most important problems of their time. And what came out of those rooms was nothing short of a revolution in ideas. Individual rights, free markets, constrained power, and the equal worth of every person. This was the Enlightenment. And it revolutionized what it meant to be human and what it meant to live in a good society. And when those ideas got paired with a revolution in technology, something truly miraculous happened. Over centuries, right, human progress had been on a flat curve. And when those ideas and that technology married together, we saw human flourishing explode on an unimaginable scale. Life expectancy doubled, extreme poverty collapsed, and economic opportunity expanded to billions around the world. And so what does that have to do with IHS? We exist to spark the next Enlightenment. We support a network of more than 10,000 scholars and entrepreneurs and ideas. So these are the economists, the political scientists, the historians, and the philosophers who study how free societies get built, get tested, and get lost over time. And we invest in that network as students, we fund their research, and we connect them in to the network and to communities like this one. People who care about human freedom and what that freedom makes possible when people can innovate and build. So that's exactly what we're here to talk about tonight, and I'm going to hand it back to Jean to introduce our guests. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And like Courtney was saying, it's not in conference rooms or in passive presentations that disruptive ideas take flight. It's in the conversations that we're having in rooms like this. So we're really grateful to PubKey for the partnership on this event. So thank you, PubKey, for the partnership and for existing. So let's hear it for PubKey. And Breaking Good the name is dedicated to those disruptive ideas, the pushing on the gray area to see what's possible, permissionless innovation, growing, exploring, figuring out what can we do, not what may we do. So I'm really excited to have Marty, Ben, and Gideon Powell here for that reason. So I feel like I don't need to introduce them to you guys, but I want to out of respect for them. So Marty Bent is the founder of Truth for Commoner, a Bitcoin-focused media company, and the author of the Bitcoin Brief, formerly Marty's Bent, one of the most widely read daily newsletters in Bitcoin. Since 2017, he has published near daily commentary that cuts through the noise of the digital asset world to focus on Bitcoin, sound money, energy, and freedom technology, building on a large and loyal audience of readers and listeners. And Gideon Powell is the CEO of Choya Inc. Under Gideon's leadership, Choya has continued a tradition of hydrocarbon exploration while expanding into other pioneering industries like Bitcoin mining, data center development, and venture capital. I'm going off your bio here, my own opinion. He is the embodiment of the concepts of permissionless innovation, creative destruction, and entrepreneurship. And he's a passionate advocate for energy abundance and criminal justice reform. So join me in welcoming Gideon Powell and Marty Bent.
Is this thing on? There we go. Gideon. Turn it on.
Test.
We meet again on a stage talking about one.
Excellent.
thank you guys for being here. Thank you to the Institute for Humane Studies for hosting us. And I mean, we were talking. We've done something like this recently in March at the Bitcoin Park in Austin at the Texas Energy and Mining Summit. But I think there's a lot we can rehash and then build on from that conversation, starting it with permissionless innovation. I think the two of us were doing things in parallel in the Bitcoin mining space back in 2018 to 2022 in different ways, but really pushing the limits of permissionless innovation. I was at Great American Mining. We were going to oil and gas companies. I got Brad there in the back who was with us. We were going to oil and gas companies in the Bakken and saying, hey, don't flare that natural gas. Give it to us. We'll put it through this generator. We'll create electricity, mine Bitcoin with it. Little did we know, we were a bunch of, Great American Mining spun out of an ad tech business that was accepting Bitcoin as payment for digital ads. We're like, yeah, we can mine Bitcoin. We were dumb enough to think that we could mine Bitcoin on a well pad in the Bakken. We learned a lot of hard lessons about pipeline right-of-ways, gas makeup, how to run a generator, how to run a Bitcoin mine off that generator. But I think it was a catalyst for off-grid mining, which is becoming a very popular form of mining these days. Similarly, around that time, you were building Hodl Ranch, and I think the story there, I think it's important. You said we don't want to rehash it, but I think it's important to rehash to set the context of how far these Bitcoin mining and now AI data centers have come in the course of a decade.
Yeah, no, I think I just love hearing you mention Great American Mining because, it's the Bitcoin community is one of the first, kind of really vision-aligned communities that is globally decentralized. So a lot of us met on the internet, and we had no idea what we were doing. I mean, I kind of stumbled my way into Bitcoin mining following my intern, who broke a computer and was like just doing all kinds of unproductive things, which led us to figure out how to mine crypto, which we settled on Bitcoin. But yeah, I think it really is so fun to look back. It's been an 8-year journey for a lot of us, and really, the beauty of hindsight is how much we didn't know, but just how cool it was that we kept trying. So I had no idea how complicated the grid was. I'm familiar. Oh, what's up, John? Y'all got to meet John Franklin. He knows stuff. But really, what Hodl Ranch and Great American Mining represented was really, what helped make America. It was just, and I was really blessed. I was kind of dragged into it. I just had a kid. I was very excited to spend more time on my research that my wife was not supportive of. So I started a business.
I remember you brought your wife and your child to BitDevs in New York.
Yeah,
I'll never forget that.
So the first time we met is I went to Consensus. It was a crypto blockchain-y thing in like 2017. Nobody knew what was going on. There was so much just terrible ideas, but we're all making it up. And I was just kind of disenfranchised with that. And I texted Parker Lewis. I was like, where are the real Bitcoiners? And he was like, you got to go, here's Marty's number, go to BitDevs. So I think, oh, I'm doing Bitcoin mining. I know energy. Like, I'm kind of special. Like, I've got this Bitcoin thing figured out. And then I go to BitDevs where it was raining, and I brought, our like couple-month-year-old daughter, and we just showed up, and there was a bunch of nerds talking about software stuff that I had no idea what they were talking about. And it was one of the most fun, just humbling experience to see there's this entire community of Bitcoin. Not only do I not understand what they're doing, I don't even understand what they're doing and why it's important. Like, I had no concept. And I think that's what's been really fun, is we just continue to learn more and more. And yeah, I think back to permissionless, there was a few of us, we started out, but there was no playbook. There was no, we just kind of made stuff up. And I think what that did was operationalize, every single Bitcoin miner, if you've plugged in a computer, off-grid, on-grid, you've displayed grit, you've probably gotten a dose of humility, and you've learned something that all these AI data centers are now learning. So when we first started, our first site was a 150 megawatt campus. I had no idea if that was big or small. I just knew that some Russian dude told me that 50 megawatts was too small. So we had to go bigger. But back then, a big data center was like 5 to 10 megawatts, and we had no bearing on what was big. But now, so these, Bitcoin miners have been just absolutely scaling and at the absolute bleeding edge of what are the rate limiters on society, which is really energy and potentially in the future, compute. And I think it's really what Bitcoin miners have empirically lived is just how rate limited, specifically America and probably the world is, over something as simple as, just policy and market design. So the physics, the engineering, this is not the rate limiter. It's just political willpower and who wants to stand up and say the right thing and bring good ideas.
No, I think it's imperative because looking at the subtext here, human flourishing begins with freedom. That's something that's like a meme that I've been trying to push into the ether, and I think a lot of Bitcoiners have too, is like energy production correlates very tightly with human flourishing. There's no such thing as an energy poor, rich country. And if you look at the Henry Adams curve, which measures the energy consumption per capita in the United States, going back to 1850, I believe, if you look at it in 1971, coincidentally, for some reason or another, it flatlines. So we've had something like 5.5 decades of underinvestment in energy infrastructure. And to Gideon's point, I think in the Bitcoin mining industry over the last decade, we've become acutely aware of these bottlenecks and these problems that exist on the grid. Luckily, for the grid systems that Bitcoin miners have interacted with, Bitcoin is a very special load in the sense that we can respond to demand. Since Bitcoin's a distributed network, a miner in one part of the world can shut off without disrupting the flow of block production. Maybe it slows down a little bit, but Bitcoin miners, I think, in Texas specifically within ERCOT and other grid systems, TVA's really smart on this as well, found their niche post-2021 responding to demand spikes in the grid. And I think as the ERCOT specifically became comfortable with that, I think that dovetail into the expansion of generation and where Bitcoin mining plays in that. And then I think we can get into larger loads, energy density, and now with the AI wave hitting the energy markets here in the United States, what do we do to solve the bottlenecks that exist? But just speaking to demand response specifically and what value that brings.
Yeah, I think one of the cool things about Bitcoin mining is it solved one of the biggest problems with electric grids. So if you look at the history of the electric grid, it was built for customers that were highly inelastic, so it couldn't go down. And so this created a lot of problems because you had to build for the peaks. So like literally Sam Insel was kind of the accolade to Thomas Edison, and he talks about this problem. So you had to have generation that could go up and down. Well, in a functioning market, you want supply and demand to be balanced, and you want price signals to communicate that. Well, because there was never a price signal in electricity that was clear, the entire regulatory administrative state around it and the market design set it up to assume this is a one-sided market that generation can respond to. Well, fast forward, a couple of decades ago, solar and wind started penetrating the system, and we don't have control of the generation on that. No matter your opinion on subsidies or whatever, they're marginally free, and they compete on the margin and are just dominating. Well, that opened up this opportunity at the exact same time Bitcoin shows up, and it's like, all right, well, that lack of control on the renewable side can be paired perfectly with Bitcoin mining. And I think what's been really fun about Bitcoin mining, we are profit motivated. I believe deeply that profit is critical to sustainability, but we're also trolls. And we think it is really funny to exploit a system and to identify we are making money off of this and it is wrong. And I think that's one of the kind of coming into this, oh my gosh, AI data centers. Well, there's a large group of Bitcoin miners who have been trying to engage with ERCOT, with FERC, with lawmakers on, hey, here is some incentives. We are going to continue to exploit those and use those to our advantage, but we are telling you to fix them. And I think that has been just one of the most fun things because I've debated people on this, and it's just, hey, we can empirically improve the price of electricity because there is this perfectly rational, economically rational load that will respond to price signals. And so we just don't have price signals that are very accurate. You've got 100 years of administrative state, administrative burden, fix this, tweak this. You've got dozens of these kind of grid patches that are holding it together, but we can improve upon that. And Bitcoin empirically demonstrated that. And I just think that, I mean, that's what, for years, we don't have enough electricity. Electricity is expensive. And Bitcoin miners empirically proved this is solvable. It is strictly a political willpower thing. And so I think that's kind of what set up this opportunity with the AI data centers that are really needing power and actually have credit, unlike the Bitcoin miners, to where this is really teeing up an opportunity to produce some pretty generational change that would benefit substantially every human in America.
Well, let's get into that. Like, what can AI data centers learn from Bitcoin miners? We were talking about this. I tweeted it earlier this week. Big headline in the news this week, Governor Abbott putting a pause to batch zero processing. There's 474 gigawatts in the queue in ERCOT. So customers saying, I want this many megawatts, whatever. All adds up to 474 gigawatts. I think peak generation capacity right now is 91. So
we hit a new record. Woo!
Yeah, 91 gigawatts. But we saw something similar post-Chinese mining ban, where China banned Bitcoin mining in 2021. There was a mass exodus of hash rate from China all over the world. I think like 30% of network hash rate ended up in Texas. And we had similar problems with the ERCOT queue back then. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions around what's actually happening, because people, everyday American, will see the headline, there's 474 gigawatts of requests for power in the queue, and they'll think, oh my gosh, they're going to consume 474 gigawatts. It's not actually what's happening. There's a lot of opportunists who are clogging the queue to signal to AI companies like, hey, I'm going to have power in 2 years because I'm in the queue. So what does that process actually look like, and what's happening?
I mean, this is one of the most fun, near and dear topics, because it all comes down to the statutory and administrative rules, and currently how I believe all grids, so maybe it's substantially all grids, model load is that it's firm. And that leads to an expansion of transmission build out that is just not needed as much anymore. It was the primary tool in times past. And I think, when you look at 474, that sounds big. That's a huge number. But we can fit all that in ERCOT. It just comes down to modeling. And actually, Arushi's here. She really led something called the PCLR, which was critical, because what I've been humbled by is how important deterministic data is for utilities and probably just engineers in general. And Bitcoin miners show up, we think we are hot shit. We have empirical data. We are curtailing 3 gigawatts in ERCOT when Texans need it. Bitcoin miners in Texas just every single day are continued to empirically prove that and raise trust in load, and load can be managed. And what the PCLR does is it gives certainty. It gives certainty to the grid operators that load will disappear when Texans need it most. And so really, when you look at 474 gigawatts, that's huge, that's daunting. But if you have control of the load and they bring their own generation, literally, we can fit all of that. And I think, really, I was very frustrated. The Governor Abbott, put out some of the stuff about pausing, but then I started reading the words, and I think it's awesome, because, right now there's a lot of concern about data centers. A lot of people have different opinions, but people in America are genuinely concerned about data centers locating near them, their homes, their apartments, in their community. And what specifically Texas has done, I don't keep up with all the states, is Governor Abbott's made it very clear that we're going to prioritize reliability over speed. And I think what's so unique about this opportunity in time is AI data centers they're just going to continue to proliferate. There's no slowing this down. They're going to come to Texas, America, or they're going to go overseas. We want data centers to stay in America, specifically Texas. I live there, so I'm biased, that are going to serve in the best interest of those communities. Everyone, and I blame the Federal Reserve, although I look forward to engaging constructively with them, but the money printing has continued for years, and that has continued to raise costs. And there's a whole bunch of other reasons, I'm sure, that costs are going up. But everyone has seen their costs go up. And so every single month, people get this bill in the mail or digitally, and it just is slowly going up. And it doesn't have to be that way. And so again, I was annoyed, I grieved because, we're big investors in ERCOT, and we've been 8 years preparing for this moment. But at the same time, what Governor Abbott has made explicitly clear is, look, we're going to prioritize, and we're going to, we're going to audit all these data centers, and we're not going to let anyone connect to the grid that Texans paid for. Individuals pay for that every month, and we're not going to let them hook up to the grid unless they're ensuring power is more affordable, unless they're ensuring it is more reliable, and they're taking care of, some other, important community things. So again, I'm annoyed. I'm still kind of like, man, I'd like to go fast. But when you look at the opportunity to really take a kind of a first principles approach of what is holding back America, you could easily make the argument that we have outsourced the allocation of capital to a very permissioned group called the utilities. And so I don't think there's any one company. I don't think but it's clearly there are opportunities to reimagine this. And I think the best, kind of analogy is looking at the oil and gas business. When the oil and gas business started, it was very permissionless. You could enter it, you could be a nobody rubbing 2 nickels, and you could start a service business and really start producing value. And that led to, really this like amazing virtuous cycle that culminated in the shale revolution. We have just reshaped geopolitical power around the world. I mean, America is making decisions that they never would have fathomed decades ago because we have economically infinite gas and economically infinite oil in America. And that has brought so much value. And so this concept of permissionless innovation and property rights, it just hasn't really made its way to the utility space. And so I think when we're looking at how do you ensure America's energy dominant, it's really looking at the statutory and administrative frameworks for the market design. And it's not just, oh, we need more this type of generation or that type. We don't have a functioning market. We don't have a market where an entrepreneur can look at it and say, I can enter that, and I can really look for ways to improve it and going after a profit motive.
Yeah, I think narrative and education comes into play here because people see 474 gigawatts in the queue of requests. They see the data center meme hitting the headlines every day, and they see electricity prices going up in parallel to that, and they say, this is the result of that action of all these data centers coming. Not to say that they have no impact on price, but I think it's important. I think people's understanding of our national grid systems and how they actually work is zero. Most people don't understand how these lights turn on, the interplay between utilities, transmission, generation, upstream extraction of resources. They're just completely ignorant if we're being frank. And there's a big education piece that's necessary. And it really goes back to what I was saying earlier, the Henry Adams curve. We haven't invested in this infrastructure. And it's like, I think the one thing Bitcoin miners have learned, and it took us years to really get on the narrative, like the good side of the narrative battle of like preaching human flourishing, energy abundance leads to human flourishing, and really explaining what Bitcoin mining does before people, particularly municipalities and state governments, got comfortable with it. I think AI is running into the same narrative battle right now because people are seeing the prices go up. You have Dario and Sam out there saying we're going to take all your jobs, and it's really unfortunate because if you look at the empirical data of what happens when a data center comes into a downtrodden municipality that maybe was hollowed out due to the Triffin's dilemma pushing manufacturing to China, it's material. The tax revenue that comes in, the reinvestment that comes into city works and school systems, it's there. It's Washington State, Tennessee. I sit on the board of Sphere 3D. We operate in the TVA, and we go substation hunting for excess capacity, typically in areas that are rural in Tennessee and Kentucky, and used to have large manufacturing hubs that were pushed out. But they have these substations sitting there, and they're only being utilized anywhere from 25 to maybe 50%. So we come in and say, hey, we'll take the rest of your capacity on your substation, and the utilities love that because they have a co-op where their mandate is to keep prices low. And as a Bitcoin miner coming in and buying all that excess capacity, they get more revenue, they're able to keep rates low. And empirically, we have done that where we operate in the TVA. And it's just getting better on narrative. But to your point about land use, I think that's a really important detail to get right. Like, you have to be a good neighbor, and so picking a location, particularly for generation, and then these data centers as well, is very important. And it's working with communities and state and local governments to make sure that you're putting these things in the right spot.
Yeah, I think that's what, really, if something's showing up to my community, and change is hard for a lot of people. I love change. But change can be scary. When you're looking at a community like specifically West Texas, where the oil and gas business is volatile, and there's been promises and overpromise, underdeliver, and so when a new group of people shows up, and you're not sitting down and engaging and first listening to what are your concerns, then there's going to be problems. And so, yeah, I just continue to think, even you saying like, oh, that utilities welcomes it, some utilities. And I think that's kind of the fun part is like, when I looked at Trump's ratepayer protection pledge, I loved it. But to accomplish that, we need to change some laws. We can't do that. And I think that's where there is just so much pent up demand that is held back really by the lack of permissionless. And I've really even been challenged. Like, I've met with a bunch of utilities. I use the word creative destruction, would not use that with utility. I strongly recommend you update your language when you're communicating with them. But that, I think it's also really cool because utilities, I've never been in a control room, but there are lights being kept on 24/7, and we have no idea the complexity. And I think that's another cool thing. There's a lot of really old utility guys out there who have been so far separated from the political process that they're not even thinking they can get involved. But because of the huge, need, I think there's this massive opportunity for young, inexperienced, ambitious, curious individuals and, kind of the older crowd to really blend their ideas together to really get, good ideas forward and really because we need it to be more permissionless to connect. And I think Texas has done a fabulous job on the generation side. And the next opportunity is that, just, hey, how do we make it more, how do we have standards, but also make it easier? And I think these are very known things that are doable.
I mean, we touched on these two things earlier, but I think we need to be able to experiment now because the energy density of these data centers was unfathomable 10 years ago. If you were to go to somebody 10 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, there's going to be a gigawatt, 2 gigawatt data center facility in Texas. They'd be like, you're crazy. Like, the biggest data center to date is like 25 megawatts. So we're scaling these data centers to such a level that was unfathomable a decade ago. And these, if they're connected to the grid, they're interacting with the grid, and you have to do the load studies to understand what the frequency of that draw is going to look like, particularly when you're training a model or doing inference. It's pretty variable. And so we discussed this in Austin, but this idea of bring your own generation, don't connect to the grid, and experiment with these different types of demand sources, particularly with compute, like that is necessary to figure out, okay, this is how it works. Eventually, we would like to connect this generation to the grid, but you have to understand like the variance of frequency, how it interacts with all the other participants in the grid, and to make sure you don't trip the grid eventually.
Yeah, I think the most permissionless opportunity is really to make it easier to not connect to the grid and bring your own power. I think it brings empirical certainties. It ensures reliability will go up in the long term because there is so much innovation that needs to happen. You do not want anyone innovating while connected to the grid. That is not a place for innovation. And so by making it easier and more permissionless to go off grid and be electrically isolated, we can experiment with new ways. I mean, that's really what Bitcoin miners did, was they were kind of the first to enter the grid and start trying new things, bringing new ideas, operationalizing those ideas, but it's still really scary. And we want to go faster, but I also, after spending a lot of time with utility operators, engineers, and executives, I am a lot more humbled on the complexity of this, literally the most complex, ecological system on Earth. And so by making it easier to go off grid, we will be able to test out new ideas, and we're not going to unnecessarily expand rate base. I mean, you just saw this week, Amazon supposedly has like a 7.6 gigawatt off-grid gas plant. I mean, one, that's awesome. And two, that's great. They're paying for it. So they're taking on all the risk. So, really trying to understand, and I expect to see a lot more legislative and administrative opportunities to open up all 50 states and you're gonna have to go state by state. But I think this is the clearest, easiest way is to just say, hey, look, the grid's really clogged and there's a lot going on there. We don't need to keep adding more variables. Let's get this, experimentation crowd off grid that, the Bitcoin miners have been doing for years, which is another reason when I was talking to Governor Abbott, I was kind of laughing. I was like, look, you just, you're raising accountability, which I appreciate, but also if you want to keep the grid kind of, paused for a little bit longer, that ain't going to hurt the Bitcoin miners' fault because we've been plugging in computers in the oil field for years. So if you want us to hook up, let's raise the standards and let's not be shy about how far we want to take this, because we really do need to raise accountability, because reliability and the frequency is extremely important. So we're going to keep raising accountability on the grids. I expect that's not going to slow down, but going off grid just seems like this really, really awesome way to really accomplish everything in America's interest.
Yeah, you could probably bring about the long talked about idea of microgrids, right? You start, bring your own generation, don't connect it to the grid. Maybe you're in the Panhandle in Texas, goes to Oklahoma. You have a little microgrid up there in the Panhandle in southern Oklahoma. But and speaking of Texas and ERCOT, is what we're seeing now basically the product of Texas's own success? Is it a product of the success that Texas has had being a sort of relatively free market grid system that has been willing to expand and play with these participants? And to your point about going state by state, like how pressing do you think it is for other states to adopt the ERCOT model of permissionless, maybe not permissionless, but more open market structures? Because it seems like Texas has had their hand up, we're open for business, come do it, and everybody's flooding there because the options, the relative options outside of ERCOT are not as great.
Yeah, I think it's just really hard to get the scale you can get in ERCOT. But yeah, I think, look, and this is where substantially every grid is going to go through this. AI is going everywhere, and it's an amazing load. It's parallel processing compute. It also can curtail and respond, and it's going to get better over time. But what we're learning in the, that's what the fascinating thing and why we should not rush batch zero is because the decisions we're making on that are Governor Abbott and, everyone at ERCOT, the PUC, just that massive complex stakeholder system. Everyone's going to follow what ERCOT does. Like, I'm a huge grid nerd. I went to Seagray 2 years ago, which is the largest grid conference in the world. Everyone, when they heard, oh, y'all are in ERCOT, they wanted to talk to us. It actually was kind of cool because as a Bitcoiner, people don't always want to talk to you at grid conferences. But everyone was very interested in what's ERCOT doing? How's ERCOT handling this? And so I think, yes, grids are going to need to follow what ERCOT does, but additionally, there's completely, a lot of the, policy wonks kind of understand how nuanced this stuff is. There is a massive, like even California, I'm kind of embarrassed, but they're doing one of the first vehicle to grid pilot programs. Like there is an infinite, as somebody else coined, the grid is America's last great socialist relic, and we should update that. And so there is almost an infinite option set of very specific ways we can just improve the market design to let the market kind of solve for scarcity and frequency events.
Well, one example, we talked about this in Austin, but I always like bringing it up because it blows my mind. Just a real-time pricing API that you can plug into for a Bitcoin miner or a data center. Like TVA, we participate in demand response, but they literally call us when they'll like squint, look at the chart. They'll be like, yeah, I think demand's going to peak tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Can you make sure you shut off? And it's a very manual process where it's like, it's 2026. Like, get a real-time pricing API that you can plug into a firmware or a software system that'll react automatically. So I don't have to like literally go to the location and hit a button.
Yeah, I think that's one of the coolest things. It's really Bitcoin miners and battery companies have really, it's really as simple as just improve the scarcity pricing temporally and spatially of what the grid needs when it needs it. And like really ERCOT has continued to really pioneer this. And I think that's where, there is so much opportunity. It's kind of been challenging. Where do you start? But yeah, and we haven't even scratched the surface on what AI can do. And again, you need to be extremely prudent because all grids affect, everybody that's connected to them. But there is an infinite amount of options to really just accomplish two economic principles: increase utilization rate and increase economies of scale. And so like really there is this, kind of flywheel that really is in its infancy as it relates to electricity and energy abundance in America. But it all comes down to price signals. I mean, that's what we just don't have accurate price signals. And there are so many different layers to inform that. But if you're a grid nerd, it is a very, very fun time.
I mean, I know more. If you would have told my 26-year-old self before I got into Bitcoin mining, I would know as much as I do about the grid system. I would have told you you're crazy. But it's simple things like the metering. It's like you can't even meter the amount of electricity you're sending an end customer correctly in a lot of cases, which blows my mind. It's like you don't even know how much electricity is going to customers.
And the great thing about being a Bitcoiner and really pioneering this concept of retard maxing is you have what you believe is a good idea and you want to present it, but back then we didn't have AI, so we would go talk to the humans and present them with ideas.
Trust me, bro, it's gonna work.
And I thought I had a great idea, and I was talking to, I think it was a guy out of California, and I was like, oh, let's have it to where every vehicle is basically at your home and can sell power back, because like you take Houston, Texas, or any place where there is storms and hurricanes. When there's a hurricane, big trees fall, big power lines go down. It doesn't matter how many wires you build. You cannot build a more resilient anything to overcome Mother Nature unless you bury things, which is sometimes too expensive. So I had this idea, let's have our cars to where basically when a power line goes down, my diesel truck or electric vehicle, whatever, can basically sell power to my neighbors. And I spent a lot of time. Again, I didn't have AI, and I thought this was a great idea. Well, I pitched it to some utility nerds, and they then let me know that we don't know what wires go down. So you might think it's a good idea, oh, you're selling power, but there might be a down power line, so where we shut down the power, now you're selling power in an event where that electricity could be a live wire. And I never thought of that. So I think that's where, the utility space, and that's why we've really tried to go to the Nerd Fest, like IEEE, Seagray, like true, no politicians, just what is the grid nuances, and really present ideas and then get feedback and then really just listen. And that's what's been really fun. There are so many problems in the grid. Every single one of them is solvable. It is just a question of political willpower and making sure your good ideas turn out to be great ones.
Yeah, I mean, another example I can think of this is like West Texas and other parts of the country that have overbuilt renewables, like wind and solar, and it corrupts I know you said you don't care about the renewable energy credits, but objectively, there was a corruption of incentives in the system where the renewable energy credits like favored wind and solar over fossil fuels and nuclear production, and it really corrupted the allocation of capital where you could overbuild wind particularly, and then generation of wind overnight would shoot up. It would drive prices negative for everything, for natural gas, nuclear, whatever it may be. And then you have a problem, particularly for a nuclear facility, where prices are negative because wind's producing so much, and you're having to eat that cost because you can't shut down your reactor. And so Bitcoin mining, I think, empirically, again, probably the word of the night for me. I don't use that word too often, but like we've seen this, Bitcoin miners behind the meter at wind farms, when prices go negative, instead of selling it to the grid, just mine Bitcoin with it. And it creates this sort of price stability, which actually has a knock-on benefit for other forms of generation that don't get the shit end of the stick because of these sort of incentive imbalances that have been introduced with subsidies.
Yeah, I am very glad that the solar and wind PTC credits are going away. The production tax credits distorted the market, and they gave a really good excuse for people to not dig into the nuances specifically of solar and batteries. So now that those are fading out, you're going to have a more functioning market. And I think that's the hard thing is when prices were going negative, it was like, okay, well, let's combat that subsidy with another subsidy. And then I'm sure there's an economic term for that, but it's just the opposite of a virtuous cycle of mutual benefit. It is the opposite direction. What is it? Yeah, vicious cycle, exactly. But now that those are going away, I think, and again, the hard thing about grids is you'll get your idea, and then you'll go to this grid, you'll go to CAISO, you'll go to ERCOT, you'll go to MISO, and you'll have your specific thing you want to study. Well, to really compare apples to apples between grids, it's almost impossible because you're overlaying so many different logic sets. And so, I am very happy to see the PTC going away because that really distorted and was kind of something that I've continued to see of like subsidies bad, and like I agree. And so now we at least are removing one variable to better understand marginal economics. And so, but I think it's pretty clear. You look at solar is not slowing down. Batteries are one of the most amazing things. I've had to eat humble pie. They are comparable, maybe even more important than flexible load, but they are helping improve the market. And I think now with generation, one of the problems is it's really hard to price fat tails event. That's maybe even one of the roles of government. But we need more baseload generation, but when you come in with merchant generation, it's really not that economic. So do you subsidize it or do you get creative? And I think that's something that politicians are gonna need to weigh in on. If, okay, we don't want to distort the market, but how do we incentivize more generation to come in that is useful to the people that paid for the grid?
What do you think the lowest hanging fruits are on the policy side to unleash this permissionless innovation?
I think we need to put voters and residential ratepayers first. I think for a long time, residential ratepayers have been helping subsidize the grid, and that made sense. But we can prioritize through statutory clarity and some other ways to make it very clear that if you're going to connect to a grid that, voters paid for, then we should only ensure the best, not just data centers, anyone connecting to that grid of large scale is improving reliability and affordability, full stop. And that just isn't, the incentives aren't necessarily aligned. And it is actually illegal to discriminate or prioritize. And so you've got to be very careful. And I think that's where we need laws change. We need to make it, again, Americans paid for the build out of this grid, and it was socialist, and it did work because it was a massive investment that helped us win World War II. I think there is all these amazing, but now it's time to really reimagine. What do we want out of the grid? And I think that we should I think there are businesses that are critical, and I think that really residential ratepayers should absolutely be the ones that benefit from something that they paid for. And that there's pretty clear bill text language out there for that.
On the data center side, who would you say is doing this right and doing this wrong from an approach, both with the grids and their local communities?
I'll take it in a two-part. I think what Chad Harris did at the early days of Riot was the playbook.
Him in his hard hat, taking videos, explaining what's going on.
Us Bitcoiners, we struggle. You don't like Bitcoin, we're going to tell you why you're wrong. We're going to logic harder. You don't like data centers, we're going to logic harder. What Chad did was he humanized a story. He connected people in the communities where Bitcoin miners went, where he set up shop, and he really helped people see the benefit, and he connected the story. So I'm sad he isn't on LinkedIn as much anymore, but I think what he did, I think he wrote a playbook. I think he really did, getting in the community, talking to people, and really telling other people's story that are benefiting. And again, there's a lot of concerns around data centers. And if every single data center would have adopted the Chad Harris, AKA Giga Chad playbook, God, Bitcoiners are so weird, but he is the Giga Chad. So I don't think anyone, I don't think any single individual, I really think Chad might be one of the most influential when it comes to building trust with communities and just normalizing this kind of open sourcing information. I mean, he walked around with his phone. I mean, I think he'll be in the history books. And then I also think Google was the first one to credential the Bitcoin miners. They were the first ones to do JVs with Bitcoin miners. And then they have been talking publicly, and it's kind of annoying. They're hiring all the best flexible load enthusiasts. And so really what they've done is really, Bitcoiners were outsiders, and, TeraWolf, Iron, Cypher, all these companies were super early, well-positioned, but none of us...
Riot just signed a big deal yesterday.
Yeah, Riot just signed a $9 billion deal with AMD. These are our friends who were total degenerates a few years ago. Now they're doing huge deals and, really making an impact.
Yeah. What, what are you most looking forward to the next, or what do you think is most critical to get right in the next 12 months? Because this is becoming a political, almost partisan issue. We're heading into midterms. We're going to be on the back end of midterms. Who knows which way it goes? What is your hope after midterms in terms of how this city and the politicians in this city view what's happening with the AI build out and energy in general?
I think we have a generational opportunity. I really do. I think when you look at what is needed, what is national security interests, what sets every single individual up for success, it's abundant energy. It's cheap, abundant, super reliable energy delivered to your home, to your business. And I think right now there's never been a better time, and it is very difficult. Everyone wants to go fast. I understand that. But I really think getting batch zero right in Texas sets a precedent that every single other, substantially all other grids will learn from. And Texas is not going to get it perfect. And I think that's one of the hardest things. I do not envy ERCOT leadership. I do not envy the PUC leadership. And I do not envy the decisions, of Texas lawmakers. But I think, there is so much going on in America, and it is a question of political willpower and doing the right thing and asking the tough questions and being okay to say, hey, we're going to pause this, but we're going to get it better and we're going to get it right. And the decisions that we're going to make is going to make every single individual in America have better affordability and keep more of what they make. And so I don't think there's anything more important than getting, grid policy right for all Americans.
Yeah, it's right there in front of us, and it is so exciting just being involved. I mean, with Bitcoin mining for the last 8 years, but now really diving into the AI side of things too. The opportunity is unfathomable, I would say, and it's right there for the taking if we want it. We just need the political will to get out of the way, do things the right way, methodically, but I think most importantly, get out of the way where it makes sense and let people build. And then on top of that, the AI, Anthropic and OpenAI need to get better at narrative forming. They're terrible. Like, they are not doing themselves or any of us any favors. As somebody uses AI more and more every day, it's like you have an incredible product. I don't think it's going to take everybody's job. I think it's actually going to be additive I think it will displace some jobs, but I think overall it's additive for individual freedom, innovation, creativity, and the economy more broadly. And if we don't get this right, it's going to be a major setback for the United States this century. And it can go one of two ways, and we're right on the cusp of deciding which way is it going to go. And I think getting out of the way, and then on the industry side for the AI people, it's like really cleaning up the narrative. And we learned this in Bitcoin mining the hard way, but you can do it. And I think one thing that's playing to our benefit is, I'm sure some of you guys saw, but the whole woke 1, woke 2 meme that was going around today, but like the DEI, ESG, climate hysteria seems to be in the back window right now. And it's really setting the narrative of like, that was completely wrong. Human flourishing correlates tightly with energy abundance, cheap energy abundance, and getting people excited about that idea. Like, yes, you should want to use as much energy as possible. That is not a bad thing. Yes, you want to be efficient. You don't want to be polluting. And there are ways to do that, and just getting people excited about winning and painting an optimistic view of the future.
100%.
Do we want to do Q&A?
Yep, we have time for a couple of questions. Does anyone have any questions? Yes. Back there.
Thank you so much. This was absolutely a great talk. I was just wondering, I mean, you mentioned how like Anthropic and OpenAI are sort of shooting themselves in the foot and shooting all of us in the foot at this point. I'm very frustrated by that. And I'm wondering what you think is the solution to that. Because I think they've spent like 4 years poisoning the well by like talking about the permanent underclass and everyone's going to lose their job. I don't think that's true, but like, and I think cynically that's like probably just a way for them to concentrate market power. But like I'm concerned. I think like the public is turning against AI and against any innovation, and I feel like there has to be some solution, and I'm just wondering what it is from your perspective.
I'm happy to announce that Anthropic came out this morning and said they're going to cure cancer. So they literally said that we're going to focus on on curing cancer. I agree with you. I think all this posturing is an attempt by them to fearmonger to create regulatory moats for themselves. I mean, Dario was on Capitol Hill in 2023 screaming about open source models and how they're dangerous. And obviously we've had OpenAI and the Hugging Face, their frontier model broke its sandbox, hacked Hugging Face. I think that's fear-mongering too. I think the amount of investment capital that's been concentrated in those two companies specifically has increased the incentive for them to play dirty because of the return on capital they need to bring to their investors. But I mean, we've felt it in the last 2 weeks very acutely in the Bitcoin world. When Kimmy K3 dropped, people started looking at all the open source Bitcoin projects and finding vulnerabilities. And I'm not sure if you guys have been paying attention, but the meme of the Bitcoin red team has emerged in the last 2 weeks. And it's basically a bunch of disparate industry participants that are developers trying to, as quickly as possible, audit every code base that they can with these frontier models. And they've been forced to use Kimmy K3 because OpenAI and Anthropic downgrade them from the frontier models to do code security review. And so the point I'm trying to make here is Anthropic and OpenAI are fear-mongering. The politicians are buying into that fear-mongering. On top of that, they're curbing innovation and curbing access to frontier models to individual American citizens and business owners who truly want to do good and protect systems. And the product of that is the Chinese open weight models are winning. Like, you have American business owners and developers being forced to choose these open weight models from China because they're actually open. And I think the use of these models over the last 2 weeks, Kimmy K3 particularly, has proven that they are useful when used in a good way. And the overarching point is, like, I think OpenAI and Anthropic completely need to pivot their narrative. They need to stop trying to fight for regulatory moats and license regimes because they will get outcompeted by the open weight models. They need to accept competition and figure out how to monetize on the back end, because their attempts to justify their valuations and produce a return on invested capital for investors is objectively, it's been at the detriment of American business owners and consumers in the last month.
Yeah, I think you need to acknowledge that AI is truly a revolutionary moment. But I think it also kind of speaks to, IHS's vision. Ideas are very powerful. And right now, we need clear ideas, we need good ideas. And I think it is intellectually lazy to come out and say everyone's going to lose their jobs. I think, one, that's a certainty statement, and it's not true. And I think it's really, I'm very blessed. I run a private business. I don't give a shit about next quarter's earnings. I really don't at all. And it's been a really challenge as the CEO of a company, because I see how I can use AI to replace most of my employees. That's hard to acknowledge, and I think it would be lazy of me to hit that easy button. As Batch Zero has proven, my team relishes in doing very, very difficult things. And when you look at what AI's done, there's a few paths you can take, but what it's truly given to me and some of the people I care the most about is it's given me an opportunity to pierce through administrative burdens, stress. I mean, what my team and I are doing on the legal side, again, I'm going to use this word retard maxing because it's awesome. We have amazing attorneys, but we are not asking our attorneys, hey, go figure this out. We are having some of the most in-depth, intellectually honest, and challenging, nuanced conversations. And I've opened it up to most of our employees to start engaging with attorneys, engaging with outside folks. So I think you can keep saying and doing the fear-mongering, but again, I think it's lazy. I think Jensen, CEO of NVIDIA, said something. I don't know how to quote him exactly, but it was to the effect of, like, look, if you can use AI to replace everybody, that's just dumb. Like, this is a human liberation tool that can allow people to discover their gifts, experiment, and truly self-actualize at a rate. I mean, if you look at, there's the founder, first generation, then the second generation grows it, third generation loses it, but, or maybe they become artists or politicians or something. But I think we can compress. I mean, I think this is like, you look at Africa, they haven't had near the opportunities, and why? I think it's access to energy and property rights is a big thing. But you now have billions of youth with access to the internet and the opportunity to have infinite intelligence in their hand. And so I think this is just a completely revolutionary moment, and it all comes down to your mindset and your view of the future. I don't think there's ever been a better time to be alive. I'm truly emotional right now because I think it is so awesome. I mean, we were talking about this on the flight up here. I was told a story. It was like, look, if you could trade lives with anybody, let's say there's a pool of marbles, and every marble represents a life. Would anybody take chance and grab one of the marbles out there to see whose life they would take, or to replace? And it's like, all of us have the best lives. You're born in America. Yes, we have problems, but America is so awesome. I'm very blessed. I've traveled. There is no better place. We have the high ground. And so this fear-mongering, it's not founded in anything grounded in the principles that founded America, and I think is just intellectually lazy.
We only have like 2 minutes left, so probably not enough time for a question, but like, what's the last thing you want to leave people with, each of you?
I just think the world's so malleable. I mean, it really is. And it takes grit, persistency. I'm 8 years in to trying to understand America's grid system, but I'm on a stage. I think that's cool. And, I've had every kind of advantage you could want, but those just simply gave me doors to open. And I think right now, I mean, I'm very blessed. I'm at the IHS team. I'm at Bitcoiners. I think this is such an awesome time in just human history, because really we have all these amazing technologies. We have all these things at our fingertips. And if you look on your computer, and I'm very guilty of this, the more time I look, there's this cognitive dissonance of everybody's mad. And I think what PubKey's done and many others are doing is creating spaces for people to have conversations and to listen to the other side before mansplaining why they're wrong. I think this is such a unique time, but I think we got to listen. And so I think, what IHS has led and, really created in this like entire cohort of freedom advocates, someone just said, I have an idea, and let's go put some resources behind it. So I think this is a very malleable time. If you're going through a hard time, you recognize that, but there are tools, there are avenues. It has never been a better time to be alive and to see something and really to spend time going and getting it, and really focusing on this is a journey and not a destination. I mean, really focusing on the journey of life is just the coolest thing ever. And now there's never been a time like this.
Yeah, I mean, I co-sign everything Gideon said, but then just building on that, like, I don't know, inject the, what's the word I'm looking to describe this? Like,
Just doomerism?
no, unabashed optimism is what I was going for.
You had a saying about that. You coined a phrase. You remember it? We're gonna win.
Well, yeah, we're gonna win. Yeah. I don't think I was the first one to say that, but yeah, we are gonna win. I mean, you have that mentality. Like you can. It's overplayed. It's cliche, but like you can literally just do things. I think Gideon's a perfect example of that. I had. This is gonna get very personal. I literally, when I was 26, before I started the newsletter, the week before, I'd been married to my wife for 2 months. The week before I started the newsletter, I was unemployed for 18 months at that point. I tried to jump from finance to tech, had a hard time. I failed at getting a dog walking job and just started, literally they said, you cannot put this harness on this French bulldog. We can't allow you to walk dogs. And I said, oh God. But then I knew a lot about Bitcoin. I started writing about it. And I just willed my way to starting a media business, starting mining businesses, working at an investment fund. Like to Gideon's point, there's never been a better point in human history to go out and just do things. And I think you'd be surprised at your ability to brute force your will on the world if you're motivated, consistent, and you show up and you get the messaging right. I think everybody in this room is paddling in that direction. And I think if we are consistent, we will win. We're going to win.
We're going to win.
Thank you so much to Marty and Gideon, and sorry for everyone whose questions we didn't get to, but like I said, we're assembling in a tavern, a pub, a salon. We're going to be here for another hour. They're going to be around, so if you didn't get the chance to ask your question, feel free to ask it to them directly, and enjoy.